Thank you. As you can see, we are recording this webinar. Assuming everything is working as it should be, everything I am saying is being live interpreted in Spanish on our Spanish translation channel. So in order to listen to the language interpretation in the meeting or webinar controls at the bottom, you will see this click interpretation globe. Once you click that and click the language that you would like to hear, so in this case, you have English and Spanish as the option, you will click that and then click mute original audio, and that should allow you to log on and understand and listen to the Spanish translation channel if that's what you like. So I'll have Maricela with the district and make that announcement here if you're not in that channel right now.
Hola, muy buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la reunión de hoy. Como este es un poquito diferente, como es un webinario, queríamos explicarles un poco de cómo ingresar al idioma de español, al canal de español. Si usted quiere escuchar esta reunión en español, simplemente busque el logotipo que está ahí en la pantalla, que es como un globo y dice Interpretation. Va a seleccionar eso y luego va a querer también oprimir el botón que dice Español o Spanish, para que lo pueda escuchar en español, y también es posible que tenga que seleccionar el botón que dice Mute Original Audio, y eso significa silenciar audio original. Y sabemos que ustedes no van a poder participar hablándome en este momento, ¿verdad? Para decirme que tiene problemas técnicos, pero para ingresar otra vez, voy a repetirlo, tiene que seleccionar el logotipo y luego español y luego Mute Original Audio para silenciar ese audio original. Y ya vamos a seguir con la reunión. Gracias. Thank you, Jess.
Thank you. And I'm going to keep this up here just a little bit longer while we let other folks log on. And I will, as I'm starting to see the participants logging on kind of slow down, we can start to get going. But again, we will remind folks, hopefully everyone who has been a part of our CSE meetings requiring Spanish are familiar, but we are always at the bottom of your screen, even though we are in webinar mode, there is a raise your hand function. So hopefully if you have any, or I shouldn't say hopefully, definitely, if you have any questions or any technical difficulties, please click that raise the hand button. We will then be able to unmute you and have you ask your question. All right, it looks like the same, I've kind of had the same number of people logged in for probably the past minute or so. So we'll definitely get started. I'll just kind of leave this up for 2 more seconds. Hopefully people start to get logged into the Spanish channel. And then I'll have the Spanish language interpreters. If you hear anything on your end, please don't hesitate to raise your hand and let me know. And then same thing with our sign language interpreters. If we do find we have someone on the call that is using you in real time and you need us to slow down, or you feel like you need us to slow down, please let me know or let any of the facilitators know as they come on as panelists. So I've finished sharing my screen. I want to thank you all for attending this webinar. Again, it's a little bit different than you normally have experienced as a part of the community steering committees, whether you've participated as a steering committee member or as a member of the public. So I definitely want to welcome you and thank you for all for being a part of this process. The first thing I want to sort of explain is there are 4 different communities for AB 617 here in the Valley. And so all 4 of those communities are represented either live on this webinar right now, or should be watching, hopefully if they get a chance. We are recording and we will be posting this webinar for folks who could not make the meeting this afternoon to still be able to participate and be a part of this process. So we want to thank you all for being a part of it and understand that you are all in different stages of AB 617. So the role of the facilitator, although it's generally the same in terms of what a facilitator is and what they're there for, is going to be a little bit different in each community. So we definitely understand that, which is why we wanted a lot of different folks to have a lot of different opportunities to ask questions, get our facilitators prepped for those questions ahead of time. But like I said, also be able to watch this at a different time if this time did not work for them. I want to go over really briefly what a facilitator is and just generally why we have one. I'll also explain what the process has been in the past, and also just really recognize a lot of folks who have helped us get to where we are today, which is a very different process than we've had before, which means we're asking for a lot of input and feedback and recommendations from the steering committee members themselves. So just briefly, a facilitator, as a lot of you know, whether you're in a community where Erica Manuel is your facilitator or Hannah is your facilitator, they are the third party, the neutral party that is neither part of the CSC nor part of the Air District or CARB, who help run and operate the meetings. They work with the district, the community co-hosts, and the community leads to prepare agendas for meetings. They help us with the Zoom controls, and they're not helping us today because this is to find a new facilitator, and we can already feel that having them is very useful. And they are also neutral in a third party in the sense that, as a lot of you know, or if you're kind of in Arvin where it's sort of a newer process, you'll learn that we work a lot in these communities to build consensus, meaning we try to come together in agreement on something, or we vote on something. And in those types of cases, having someone that's neither party that helps run those votes or helps us arrive at those conclusions, those are our opportunities, or those are the needs rather, of having that extra person, that outside person help run them. Another big thing that we've had our current facilitators be a part of, that a lot of you are very familiar with, is our stipend program for the resident members of the CSC. And so it is not the district actually that runs that program, it is the facilitator, again, a neutral third party who processes all of that paperwork, who goes through and sort of reconciles or looks at the participant lists, the log in, log off times, all of those things are done by our facilitator. So a little bit, just briefly, history of sort of where we've come and where we are today. A lot of you know that Institute for Local Government, or ILG, have been our facilitators for all of the communities for the past 2 years now. And prior to that, we actually had a different facilitator in Fresno than we did for Shafter, and neither of those were ILG. So they were two other separate facilitation companies. In all 3 cases, we went out with something that's called a request for proposals, or an RFP. And we went out with a set of requirements that we needed to have that neutral third party, and then ask people to apply, propose themselves to the district. And then we selected based on qualifications and past experience and references. And a lot of the times, actually, we heard from those people through recommendations from steering committee members. But that's how we selected them in the past. And so we've heard a lot, as I mentioned a little bit ago, from a lot of you and a lot of resident members and advocates and other people who have been a part of this process for a long time, that you all want more of a say in how we select that group of facilitators. So this time around, based on that feedback, we wanted to make sure we had a fair and equitable process. We wanted to make sure that we had opportunity for people to ask questions without going so far as to have several different hours-long interviews and make it too cumbersome, because we also know generally we are all busy. We ask a lot of you. We ask for several meetings a month from a lot of you, and so having separate, several hours-long meetings with the different facilitation teams, we definitely weren't sure that everyone would have an opportunity to participate in those. So we arrived at today where we asked all of you, or we asked anyone on the CSC, to fill out the survey you saw about a week or so ago, filling out a survey where you got an opportunity to ask questions. And those questions, a lot of them, we had a participation from every steering committee. A lot of the questions were very similar to one another. So you'll probably hear a question today that reflects or is whether it's the same wording because we use that your particular question, or it's similar because your question reflected exactly something else someone said. Those are the types of questions, or those are how we posed those questions to the facilitators. We sent those questions to the facilitation teams, and today we have 2 facilitation teams that are interviewing for you. And then we're giving them a platform today to answer your questions and to really let you know a little bit more about themselves and give you an opportunity to give us feedback about them. So I'm going to share a little bit. You should have received an email actually from the person. You probably receive more emails than anyone else in the world at this point, if you are a part of the CSC, from Zong. And we're all very familiar with emails from Zong. And I will share my screen. This is in both English and Spanish. And in this email, you can either bring this up right now while we go through the webinar. You can do it later and after the webinar, after you've had a chance to hear everything, or maybe once you are, maybe you want to rewatch the recording. But we sent this survey, and I'm going to try to make it as big as possible. So hopefully it's nice and big. But I will share with you the link in a second if you didn't get a chance to open your email, or if you're just now checking your email. And this survey, we have, of course, asking you to submit your name and all of your information, but I will outline for you right now the questions that we received and let you know how we want you to participate and give your feedback. So the first question, and right now it says Local Government Commission. The 2 people we're actually interviewing, just so you know, all of this is going to be for the first person, and then as you scroll down, you'll see it for the second person. The second is for Harder and Company. So this first question is, describe your background and experience. Are you and or your team bilingual? So we received this question in many different ways from several folks, but this is a question, and again, all of the questions I'm about to read, we did submit to the facilitators ahead of time, so we hope that they answer these questions. The second are, what purpose and principles drive your work as a facilitator? The third is, give an example of how you encourage inclusivity among the various stakeholders. How do you apply those skills to facilitate meetings and work through difficult interactions? The fourth is, how do you prioritize environmental justice and uplift community voices? Please describe one of your successful projects working with an EJ community. The fifth is, what experience or background do you have with AB 617 or air quality? And how are you familiar with what has already been done? And the final question is, does your organization have an interest in conducting facilitation training to support community leadership during implementation? And then finally, we ask that you provide any general notes you might have. By the way, you don't have to fill out any of these. This is just if you would like to provide feedback or take notes as we go along. And then we ask, again, those same exact questions of the second panelist. At the end of this survey, so either at the end of this webinar or later when you go to rewatch this video, or if you don't have a chance today, later when you go to fill out the survey, we ask which facilitator, number 1 or number 2, would you recommend for your community? In all told, you can certainly provide any and all notes and feedback. But at the end of the day, really, we want to know what your recommendation is based on the 2 facilitators that we have today. I will stop sharing my screen. We have a few minutes here that I would like to invite anyone, if you have clarifying questions on the technical piece, meaning how to access the survey or anything of that nature. And if not, I see we have Josh on, and so if we don't see any questions, I will have Josh elevated. Josh is from the Local Government Commission. He is the first panelist. I will have Josh elevated and then ask Josh to let us know who else is on the call that we can make a panelist. So I'm not seeing any questions. Michelle, I'm not sure if you are.
No, I don't see any questions, Jess, and I just promoted Josh.
Awesome. So Josh, if you could, thank you for joining us. We're really excited to have you. Josh, if you could let us know who else needs to be elevated, and then I will kind of let everyone know sort of what I've told you about the process, what's going to happen the rest of this evening or afternoon, and then we'll let you get going.
Okay. Great. Can you hear me? Hello, everyone. So Josh Meyer here, and we're waiting. Julia will be joining me from my organization, Julia Kim. So she may be in the waiting room or coming on momentarily.
Okay, so what we'll do is, oh, they're excellent. The team figured that out pretty quickly. Okay, so we're all right. Before I let Josh and Julia go, I just want you all to know what we've had Josh and Julia and then our second panelists later in the afternoon. We let them know, as I mentioned earlier, that we submitted those questions and that we were going to give them half an hour to provide us background about them, answer those questions, and provide us any other details they'd like about their involvement or the reason really that they applied to be involved. And if there are no like major clarifying questions, that's actually what we'll do is we'll end the panel there. I will actually give us all a 10-minute stretch break. It's a little different than a normal CSC meeting. It's a lot to just sit here and kind of watch a meeting like this. And then we'll all make sure we come back in time, and I'll let you know the times of these, but we'll come back in time just after 5 for our second panelist. So without further ado, it's 4:20 on the dot. I will have Josh and Julia, and we're not starting a timer, so if it's a couple minutes, definitely don't worry about it, but about half an hour to give everyone a lowdown and answer their questions. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share my screen, so give me just a second to do that. It says that the host has disabled my screen sharing. Is it a possibility to undisable that?
Yes,
Let me see.
you will get that in a
Great.
second.
Excellent. Okay. So stand by while we have a presentation to help compose our discussion, and we hope there will be an opportunity for conversation and Q&A after. So in this. Okay, so I'm hoping everyone can see this. Yeah, okay. Hearing none, I think we're okay. Okay, so I'm Josh Meyer with the Local Government Commission. I have with me also Julia Kim. I am Program Director of Community Design. Julia is Director of Climate Change and Energy. And just a little bit of background about who we are for those of you who are not familiar, and maybe some of you haven't heard of us before. We've been around for about 40 years now, and we work throughout California. We're California-based. We do a little bit of work nationally. We bring ideas from California to a national audience, but we're really organized around California. And a lot of what we do focuses on connecting leaders and supporting policy and program development and assisting with local visioning, planning, capacity building, and implementation of ideas once they've been recorded and put into an action phase. We have several programs, and all the programs are interconnected, but our areas are community design, which is what I lead, and we focus there on the changes in the built environment, among other things. And then we also have Julia, who leads climate and energy, and focusing on climate adaptation and community resiliency, and also solutions to addressing challenges associated with climate change, and energy efficiency, renewable energy, and also water is another area that we work in, and water resource management and conservation and land use planning to keep water clean and plentiful. And we also have a fellowship program, national service program that is focused on California, where we place individuals every year, mid-career, early career individuals with with communities and nonprofits and agencies to help with a variety of different efforts. Speaking a little bit to the questions that you've asked, I mean, I think you'd like to hear about our background and experience, and one in community design in particular, we've done well over 100 intensive community-driven planning efforts over the last 2 decades. And the majority of those are in low-income, disadvantaged, and historically underserved communities. About 3/4 to 4/5 of the work we do is in that area, and particularly in the San Joaquin Valley. So probably about 40+ projects have been in the San Joaquin Valley, small communities, unincorporated towns, portions of bigger cities in Stockton and Fresno, Bakersfield. So very important to us. Our office is located in Sacramento, but we work throughout the state, and the Central Valley and San Joaquin Valley in particular has been a place that's important to us, and we've been involved with for decades. The kind of work that we've done is really stakeholder and community meetings and events, which we conduct regularly in English and Spanish. We have native Spanish speakers who are facilitators, and the kind of work that we've often done is looking at sustainable transportation and land use, community revitalization, and placemaking in communities large and small. And the types of things that we've done is facilitated advisory groups, one-on-one or small group stakeholder listening sessions, larger community meetings, often in a series. And also we like to work outdoors and do site tours and walk audits in partnership typically with nonprofit and community-based organizations in those communities. And talking a little bit about our approach, it's really critical that we make participatory planning central to our practice. And we think that residents are the ones that are truly the experts in the room. And also it's important for transparency and inclusion every step of the way. And I think Julia at this point also has some things to add along these lines as well. So.
Great. Thanks, Josh. And hi, everyone. It's so exciting to be here joining you all. Thank you for this opportunity. So if LGC were to be selected, this would be a collaboration between the community design and the climate energy teams. So I want to share a little bit more about the climate energy team's approach. So we have a lot of experience engaging stakeholders, building coalitions, focusing on capacity building. And this is really because collaboration is absolutely essential to respond to climate change and to address a number of different community needs. We know that climate change is impacting all of us, almost every aspect of our lives, every aspect of society. If it isn't already impacting us, it's going to at some point. And we also know that those who are historically marginalized, those who are facing existing inequities, they are already being disproportionately impacted. So we approach all of our work with collaboration and with community in mind. One example of this is the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change. This was a collaborative effort between the City of Sacramento and West Sacramento, and LGC facilitated this process. As part of that, we formed and facilitated 6 advisory committees, engaging over 150 advisory committee members in total. This included a number of community leaders from local churches to neighborhood associations. And we design our stakeholder engagement processes in a way where we're focusing on building authentic relationships, but we're also focused on delivering meaningful outcomes. So an example of some of the outcomes that came out of the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change was the formation of a standing environmental justice collaborative governance committee in Sacramento, as well as a couple of local ordinances looking at decarbonizing buildings.
Julia, can I stop you for 1 second? Our interpreter is raising his hand. I just want to double check that everything is going well.
Of course.
Jose? Jose, I see your hand is raised. I was just checking that interpreting is going well. Hi. I can't hear you. Oh, okay, you can't. Got it. Slower. Got it. Got it. Let's
Slow
talk
down.
a little slower. Thank you, guys. And that's a great reminder. We also have folks that are doing sign language interpretation, and I am sure Sherry and Lori would appreciate that. So thanks. I also have that problem, so I appreciate it. Go ahead, Julia.
Okay, got it. Despacito. I wanted to talk a little bit more about our approach to community engagement and stakeholder engagement, our values, our principles. I know there was a question in the interview, a couple of questions that were focused on this. So in terms of our dedication to authentic and meaningful meetings and activities, we really focus on building authentic and symbiotic relationships for meaningful collaboration. Everything boils down to trust. Everything boils down to relationships, and we really honor that and approach our work accordingly. We spend time getting to know who the community is, what their interests are, what their needs are, what their priorities are, and we always think about remaining flexible and adaptable. Things change, priorities could change, different needs can emerge. So we approach our community engagement efforts that way, just in a constant state of listening, of evaluating and learning, so we can continue to improve our processes. We also have a lot of respect and care for the time of community members. Everyone has very busy lives, other pressing needs, and we recognize that. So we truly try to keep that in mind every step of the way. As Josh noted, we fully recognize that residents are the experts. We focus on having this constant state of listening. We come into these spaces as neutral facilitators. We are here to facilitate the conversation. Along the way, we're honoring and uplifting and growing community leadership and knowledge. We know that the impacts of climate change, impacts of poor air quality, those are felt locally. And it's the lived experiences of the community members who participate in these activities and these meetings. That's what really matters. The last part here on transparency and inclusion, as it says, every step of the way, as part of this, we also focus on the barriers to participation, and keep that in mind to inform when we schedule the meetings, how we're running those meetings, translations, and any interpretation that's needed, and other strategies to address specific needs like transportation needs, internet access needs. We also have a lot of experience in a virtual and in-person setting. I also see a hand raised by Nate, if we wanted to pause.
If we can, let's maybe, Nate, can we see if it's just a technical question? Because I definitely will have time maybe at the end, and I'll kind of facilitate that a bit. Nate, is yours a technical question? Maybe we can unmute, allow him to talk, and then see. Hey, Nate, do you want to?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I was just raising my hand to on a question that said, are people receiving the signal? I thought. And so I don't have the normal controls today. For example, I don't see a camera being on.
Right. Yes.
And I don't see a participation button. But yeah, I was just acknowledging that the message was coming through loud and clear. I'm sorry.
Awesome. No, I'm glad to hear. That's amazing. Yes.
Okay.
So you might have missed in the beginning, and I'll definitely reiterate. I think a few more folks joined, so that's a great reminder. This is a webinar style, so you will all notice it's slightly different. So I appreciate what Nate just said is very true. You either have interpretation or raise hand, and those are the only options, which normally, as Nate mentioned, we have turn on camera and participation and fun reaction buttons. So definitely a little different, and we appreciate it. So thanks, Nate, for the reminder. All right, sorry, Julia, go ahead.
No worries at all. I'll share a little bit about our approach to ensuring that we are inclusive. I know there was an interview question on that specifically. So first and foremost, how we conduct outreach. Again, understanding the community, who makes up the community, and particularly those who have been traditionally left out, and making sure that we're creating space around the table for all voices. We'll use targeted messaging and creative outreach strategies to welcome any and all community members to join us. We'll partner with local, excuse me, trusted organizations to support outreach efforts. And again, we're in a constant state of learning. So at each activity, assessing who's in the room and who's not in the room to make sure we are focusing our outreach efforts for future activities, make sure those folks are present. We also think about inclusivity as we design the agenda and the meeting activities, thinking about what are the power dynamics at play. We want to make sure that everyone, but especially marginalized voices, have the space and also feel empowered and supported to engage fully. In terms of facilitating, we try to create a welcoming environment. First and foremost, that means a welcoming environment where everyone feels like they're able to participate. Language access, absolutely. But also making sure community members have the information that they need to be able to engage fully. Trying to address technology issues, trying to address jargon or scientific terms so that we're meeting the community where they are. We also recognize that these types of meetings can also be fun. Collaboration is fun. Civic engagement is fun. At least we certainly think so. So we bring music in, we bring art in, we create space for storytelling, and just working with the community to shape the meeting in a way that makes sense for their culture. More specifically, in those meetings, we'll establish some norms that folks can propose, that we can adopt to make sure everyone gathered in the room is following the same kind of set of standards in how they're engaging. Again, we want to balance, we try to balance space for folks to share their perspective, but also making sure that we're working towards the objective, respecting participants for their time and capacity, and making sure that we are making progress along the way. And as experienced facilitators, we're not shy. We will step in if warranted, if we need to. If someone is maybe taking up too much space, we'll politely jump in to make sure that everyone in the room has the opportunity to weigh in. The last couple things that I'll note, there was an interview question on how we work through difficult interactions. So grounding participants in those meeting norms certainly helps. Grounding participants in the meeting objective, the shared vision, and focusing on areas of alignment. We find that these are helpful practices to potentially avoid difficult interactions. But we also want to create space for differences and respectful disagreements. The issues related to AB 617 are complex, and it's going to take a lot of creativity to identify those local solutions and to bring everyone around a common vision. So we actually welcome a healthy level of again, respectful disagreements, because we find that through these conversations, a lot of creativity can take place and a lot of relationships can be built. And yeah, we're really just focused on listening and supporting and uplifting community voices. And I'll stop there for now.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Julia. Yeah, so echoing what Julia said, I mean, a big part of this is understanding each community. There's not one size fits all. The steering committees, I've looked, and they're different sizes, there's different compositions, different cultures everywhere you go. And so it's really important for us to be, our facilitation approach is to be flexible and adaptive, and do a lot of careful planning before events to find the right format, the right way to bring in different language groups, and do we need expert simultaneous interpreter? What is the format going to look like that's going to be most effective for that particular community? So it is something that, you know, we would work through with the local co-host committee or co-host, co-facilitator, however that's organized in the charters that maybe have been set up for each one of the steering committees. And so we're ready to adapt and also check, you know, we definitely evaluate and get feedback after each event, each activity. And if we're missing something, we get back together with the group and change. We don't have, we have a lot of experience, but we don't have a certain set agenda that we come in and try to do everywhere, wherever we go. So, and with that, another question was, do we have any familiarity with air quality issues and AB 617 and so forth? And the answer is yes. We have not been directly involved in 617 communities, steering committees necessarily, but all of our work that we've talked about either directly addresses or touches on air quality with a focus on health and sustainability and placemaking in the built environment, whether we're talking about ways to make it possible for us to get around in other ways besides driving our car for every single trip, or ways to improve the efficiency of our homes and our buildings, and other things that can impact air quality. There are ways to calm traffic, slow vehicles, and maybe think about truck traffic and other things that cause pollutants and impacts on communities. So all of our work does touch on that. And specifically, we have done outreach, education, and trainings in partnership with air districts in multiple air districts in California. One example, and it's when I first came to the local government commission, I've been here for 20 years. Or about 10, 15 years ago, we did work with the Air Pollution Control District, Valley Air, to put together a toolkit on how to do compact housing and different kinds of housing approaches and street design approaches and transportation approaches to improve air quality and health outcomes in the San Joaquin Valley. And we're also currently, or most recently, did work with the Air Resources Board on their low carbon transportation investments outreach and assistance, and that has to do with the rebate programs and other resources where we can get funding. And we're able to partner with community-based organizations in regions throughout the state to put together training workshops and hear a little bit about what the issues are locally, and at the same time try to connect those issues to possible funding resources as well as technical resources to help advance their goals in those communities. And then finally, we are also involved with the Air Resources Board Clean Mobility Options Project. Some of you may have heard about it. It's a project that will provide funding in disadvantaged communities for everything from van pools to shuttles to car share and bike share and other resources that do involve shared mobility and with zero emission vehicles or electric vehicles. So through all those interactions, that's a chance. Those are just some of the avenues where we are tied into air quality issues and actions to help local communities. And I think Julia may also have some more to add to this. So
I'll add to that briefly. Thanks, Josh. So as Josh noted, we haven't had the opportunity to work directly with an AB 617 community, but we have been tracking progress at a high level we're excited about AB 617 overall because it's exactly the type of program that's needed. Impacts are experienced locally, so the solutions need to be local. They need to be informed by community. It needs to leverage community knowledge and really speak to the lived experiences of the community members locally. So the climate energy team, of course, has quite a bit of experience working on air quality issues, both from a greenhouse gas emissions standpoint, but then also from other perspectives, thinking about wildfire smoke and other issues related to air quality. We have a dual approach of focusing on specific actionable solutions while also keeping the bigger picture in mind. So, specific solutions like Josh noted around clean transportation and mobility options, renewable energy, urban greening and forestry, building electrification to improve indoor air quality. We also think about the bigger picture in terms of climate change. Reducing emissions is a critical strategy. It's necessary, but as I noted previously, we're already experiencing the impacts of climate change, and we're already seeing the negative impacts to air quality from wildfire smoke, also extreme heat, as that can worsen air quality. We also think about the multiple benefits that different solutions can provide. Even if their primary focus is to improve air quality, these solutions can provide a number of additional benefits for communities, whether that's cost savings or job opportunities or technological advancement, or just other ways to respond to community needs and empower action.
Okay. Yeah, there was we wanted to address another question that was how is it that we think about social equity and approach social equity and environmental justice in some of the facilitation work we do. So and was an example. So I wanted to walk through briefly an example that could be instructive. So I'd like to share that with you. We were involved in a project and still are in Richmond, which is in the East Bay across from San Francisco, in a neighborhood called the Richmond Iron Triangle neighborhood. And the reason it's the Iron Triangle neighborhood is it's surrounded by railroad tracks. And the community's been hemmed in and is also the recipient of industrial pollutants and impacts. It's a community that is minority majority, Latino and African American. It's in the shadow of a Chevron refinery. It also have to deal with industrial pollutants and emissions from trucks. And the history of this community is that it was a labor force that came in around World War II to build ships to win the war. When the war was over, the investment went somewhere else and kind of left this community behind, surrounded by railroad tracks. So they have that legacy to deal with, and they are bringing their community back. And we are working with them to help out. So the project that I wanted to bring up is a Yellow Brick Road. There were youth, it was conceived by youth in the summer of around 2007 or 2008. And their idea was just to create good connections, good safe connections between the places in their neighborhood, and also have it be a community expression with something like yellow stencil bricks or some other kind of theme to really feel like it's celebrating their local neighborhood. They came to us, and there was a nonprofit, neighborhood nonprofit, and asked us to help them with this planning. And we worked with them to write a grant, and the grant was received by the city and the nonprofit and ourselves as partners. And one of the roles that we needed to play was facilitating between the agencies on the one hand, the nonprofit on the other, and the nonprofit that was working with the residents, and also bring on technical consultants. So the idea was to get everybody on the same page. And what we learned from this stakeholder group as we went through this process is that the first thing that has to happen is we need to form a community outreach team, and we really need to stand back and let them assess their own neighborhood. The residents are the experts. They walked the neighborhood. They documented things very carefully while we stood back and just listened. And they organized a meeting that we came back and then co-facilitated with them to download everything that everybody had seen in the neighborhood, and developed a map to the right of desire lines. Where do people want to go, and where we would like to see change? Instead of doing traditional meetings indoors in a community workshop environment, they said, look, let's create circles, let's bring the stakeholders together. And now that we know where we would like to go, let's talk about what kind of changes we would like to see and what's going to work. And again, the community is speaking, we're still listening, and we're playing a role of translating that information back to the city decision makers and the agencies, and bringing together a kind of groupthink very carefully over time. After they had come to where their desired roots were, they said, let's bring everybody together. And now we're ready to hear from consultants. We want to hear from the technical experts. What might work out in the field? Let us take you around and show you where to go. And it was decided that by this group, and this is where I like to talk about our facilitation as being adaptive and flexible, that a workshop wasn't going to be the most effective way to generate community buy-in. Instead, they said showing things in 2 dimensions on a map or whatever is okay, but really, if you can do it out in the field and simulate it, we're going to generate a lot more feedback, a lot more conversation and momentum. So they decided to take some of the ideas that we'd come up with and along with them and put them out in the field, test them for a day, for 2 days actually. They set it up and transformed a whole area around a small park in the neighborhood, put a totem pole out and created a mini traffic circle to calm traffic and have some fun and also some community art. They led, they interacted. This is resident driven, community stakeholder driven. We were part of it. We were part of a team and a collaboration, not directing it ourselves, but part in a partnership. And then, of course, it was important to start bringing in the departments and the agency folks, and in this case, the fire department. And it's always exciting when you see a fire truck going down the street, but it was also important to have their buy-off as well. And so, again, we were playing this mediator and facilitation role between the community experts and the agencies. At the end of the day, everybody got together and celebrated what they had accomplished. And it's important to mention that this led somewhere. It was the community engagement, the community buy-in, and the buildup through a series of conversations and meetings that began attracting funding to make things happen. So the first thing that happened was temporarily putting in this mini circle to slow traffic and create a little bit of a sense of place. But since then, they've been very successful at attracting more funding and going after grants, and have received well over $10 million now to help build out changes on this entire corridor that you're seeing written where those yellow lines are. So it's the community engagement, it's the flexibility, it's the process, letting the residents speak first, second, and third, let them being part of the design of the solutions and part of the decision-making that's led to actual funding for implementation. So that's an example of the kind of work we like to see. And with that, I would like to hand things back over to Julia, and she has some more to add to all of this. So,
Jessica, I of course saw you pop in. I know we're 2 minutes over.
Let's do like 3 more minutes, and we'll just be equitable and give an extra 5 to the other team. So thanks.
Great. We'll be quick. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there was a question as part of the interview whether we would be interested in conducting facilitation training to support community leadership. Capacity building and leadership development are foundational to our approach to how we partner with communities and how we implement our programs. So one example, quick answer is yes, absolutely. Yeah, we really enjoy doing a lot of the capacity building work. And then an example that I'll share is a pilot program that we are managing in partnership with a number of different organizations called the Partners Advancing Climate Equity Program. Here you can see our model. It starts from that the right green section and then rotates up. The way that we are focusing the capacity building program is we first brought together a cohort of existing community leaders, and we've been working with them to co-create community visions, their climate resilience visions and specific solutions. As part of number one and number two, we're conducting a full series of trainings on different policy topics, on different types of solutions, on funding and financing, how to write grants, how to form partnerships, how to facilitate meetings, how to organize community meetings, and so much more. And then we're actually just now entering to number three, where our cohort of community leaders, they finished all the trainings. Now we're working with them and providing ongoing mentorship to help them train other community leaders in their network. So really launching this ongoing cycle of capacity building. And then finally, working with the community leaders and continuing to provide guidance and technical assistance so that they can really activate their communities to advance community-driven efforts. So with that, I know we're already a little over time, so just wanted to say thank you, muchas gracias. If you see on the next slide, you'll see our contact information. I don't know if we have time for questions or if we have time to hear other perspectives from the community, but I'll yield to you, Jessica.
So we don't have time for questions, but we want to thank everyone who submitted their questions ahead of time. As you all know, and as the facilitators know, every question that they were referring to was all submitted by members. One last question, I will say, this is a question that was also submitted. This is by a Stockton resident, and I will just pose it as a quick question that is, like a brief 1 minute, 30-second answer maybe. Is what context, if you are selected, would you want from the CSC in order to sort of prepare yourselves and be successful?
Go ahead, Julia.
Yeah, it's either.
You're ready to go.
Yeah, I can start. So any previous materials from past community meetings, any feedback or evaluation that was shared so that we're stepping in fully informed. We are fully committed to getting up to speed and doing that behind the scenes work. I'd also love to know, what does success look like for them? What are some potential pitfalls, some of that inside knowledge that might be helpful to know, and in a really open, honest way.
Awesome.
Yeah, that'd be very helpful. And we would draw on our experience working in all 4 communities, including Fresno, Bakersfield through Kern County Transportation Plan, Active Transportation Plan, also Arvin. We've done multiple planning efforts there, and finally in Stockton. So have some familiarity and love to learn more if we're selected and have the opportunity. So.
Awesome. Well, I definitely wanted to ask that question with everyone listening, because that's really, to you, that's an ask, of course, of the district for some stuff, but really that's an ask of the community for a lot of that feedback. So I wanted them to hear that from you. I want to thank you both. That was a lot of really, really great information. And I so appreciate, and I know the community so appreciates all of that, all of your time and all of your effort, and definitely wish you luck in the process. The community is they're all listening right now. They also have an opportunity, if you didn't hear before, to watch this recording and fill out a survey kind of at their leisure in the next several days. So we definitely look forward to everyone's feedback, and thank you both.
Thank
Josh,
you.
I'll be in contact. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, and good luck with everything. And we'll be in touch one way or the other. We'll be watching, even if we're not involved.
Awesome.
We'd love to
Sounds
see
good. Well,
how
thank you.
Thank
awesome.
you.
Thank you. I will have Josh stop sharing your screen. And I will just go ahead and thank again all of you for listening, for sitting. I know it's different, so I would actually like to, if I could give ourselves, including myself, our interpreters, 5 minutes. Our next panelist is scheduled to start at 5:10. So I think if we give ourselves until 5:05 to give ourselves a stretch break, then we'll come back on, make sure everything is going well, and I'll re-review what I said ahead of the last facilitator in case you just joined us or joined us in the middle of that. I'll also re-go over the questions. I'll talk a bit about the survey once again. And I also failed completely to tell you when I just read those questions out loud. I definitely want to share with you who those questions were from. And I will do that when we come back at 5:05. So go ahead and stretch, take a beat, and we'll see you in 6-ish minutes, 5:05. I see a few new folks have joined us. I'm letting you know we gave everyone about a 5-minute break, so that ends in 4-ish minutes. So thanks for joining. At 5:05, we'll get back on, explain the next step. And Amy, I see you. We will promote you to panelist, as well as anyone on your team here in a moment. While everyone's finishing up their break, I'm going to share my screen. And like I mentioned at the beginning, but I know again, some of you are might have come on just after we had the introduction at the beginning at 4 o'clock. But we have sent out to all of the CSC members the feedback survey that we would like you to fill out, whether you're watching this in real time or you're watching the recording. That link is in your email, but it's also here if you'd like to type it into type this URL into the top of your browser. Then I will go over here in just 1 minute when we all come back, just review that survey, review those questions that we have, re-explain very, very briefly the steps that we're going through, and then introduce our next panelist. I'm also not sure, but it definitely never hurts to be over communicative about this. But here I am also presenting, as I did at the beginning of the meeting, the instructions for getting to the interpretation channel for a language other than English. And in this case, we have interpretation happening live for Spanish, as we always do for our communities that we have regular CSC meetings for with our Spanish speaking residents. And so I will have Maricela explain the how to get to the interpretation button if you are in this channel and cannot get to the Spanish channel.
Hola, muy buenas tardes y bienvenidos. Como mencionó, vamos a enseñarles una vez más cómo ingresar a la interpretación en español. Lo que quiere buscar es el logotipo que se parece como un mundo, y allí va a seleccionar ese botón, está abajo de su pantalla de Zoom, y luego va a también querer ingresar o oprimir el botón que dice español para que usted pueda escuchar el español. Y luego también es posible que tenga que oprimir el botón que dice Mute Original Audio. Eso significa silenciar audio original para que no oiga dos voces. En este caso, muchas de las personas ya están en el canal de español y no necesitan la información, pero en caso de que alguien apenas ingresó y necesita las instrucciones, aquí están. Gracias. Thank you, Jess.
Thank you, Maricela, and thank you. Welcome back for those that were with us earlier or those that have just joined. Welcome. As you get into the correct interpretation channel, I am going to briefly stop sharing my screen. I will share it again in 1 second. As you can see here on the screen, we have a new panelist. I'll have her introduce herself in a moment here. She is with our second facilitation team that applied and is a part of this panel, and that is Harder & Company. And so just briefly, once again, for those that are sort of in the middle of the process, as you all know, we sent out a survey about a week ago, soliciting rather questions from you all to pose to the people who have applied to become the next facilitator for the AB 617 process in your community. And so we received feedback from at least someone, a couple of people in every single community, if not more. And those questions, while a lot of them were similar or kind of lend themselves to being kind of joined up together, those questions were sent to the facilitation teams, and we've asked them today to come, and we've given them half an hour, and in full disclosure to Amy, we'll give her 35 minutes, we give the other team 35 minutes to answer those questions, to tell us about themselves, about their experience, and sort of why they applied to be the facilitator for you all for this AB 617 process. Really, really briefly, for those that didn't get a chance to see it, but again, I was just sharing the link. It is in your email, and I will also, in 1 second, share it here, just walk through it really, really briefly on the screen. But if I can find it again, the survey that you all received from Zong, who is probably the person who fills up your inbox the most. It was sent out to you all. It is in both English and Spanish, as always. And this survey we would like back by Monday at noon. So if you are joining us right now, you can fill it out as we go along. If you are watching this on recording, you have until Monday at noon, and we will of course remind you all. You saw all of these questions. These were all for LGC. The exact same questions are for Harder & Company. So I'll just quickly reiterate them again, just to let you know what we've sent to the group. This first question, just so you all know, this first question was sort of a grouping of questions that came both from Estela, she is a resident in Fresno, and Michelle, she is a resident in Shafter, and that is, please describe your background and experience, and are you and or your team bilingual? The second question came from an EJ advocate and our co-lead actually for Arvin Lamont, Gustavo. And it was, what purpose and principles drive your work as a facilitator? Our third question was really a mix of kind of all similar questions that came from Margot, who is a Stockton resident, Taylor, who is a Stockton resident, and Lorelei, who is a government agency representative in Arvin Lamont. And it was, please give an example of how you encourage inclusivity among the various stakeholders. How do you apply those skills to facilitate meetings and work through difficult interactions? The fourth is a question that came from Jonathan, who is an EJ advocate in Stockton, as well as Margot, who is a Stockton resident. And it was, how do you prioritize environmental justice and uplift community voices? Please describe one of your successful projects working with an EJ community. The fifth question was a kind of a grouping of similar questions that came from Estela Ortega and Francisco Gonzalez. Estela is a Fresno resident and Francisco is an Arvin Lamont resident. And that was, what experience or background do you have with AB 617 or air quality, and how familiar are you with what's already been done? And then the last question we sent came from Taylor, who is a resident in Stockton. Does your organization have an interest in conducting facilitation training to support community leaders during implementation? So as a reminder, all of this space right here is for you to take notes if you'd like. You are not required to fill this out. We also, if you needed or wanted to send us notes on this second facilitation panel, as well as at the end, if you would please, if you'd like to tell us which facilitator you would recommend for your community. That is the rundown of the survey that was sent to you all. So without further ado, I'll note the time. It is 5:11. Again, it hasn't been a hard cut time, Amy. We definitely are being flexible, but we'd like to welcome you and ask you if you could please let us know who else on your team we need to elevate as panelists. We can bring them in right now and then get started.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for that, Jessica. If you could please let in my colleagues, Daniela Flores, Gabby Magana, Liz Lev, and Jessica Silva.
I think we have everyone you just mentioned. So without further ado, it is yours to take away, you and your team, Amy. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. My colleague, Gabby, will be kicking us off.
Thank you so much, Amy. Good afternoon, buenas tardes. We're excited about this opportunity and looking forward to sharing some information with you all today. We understand that the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution District is seeking neutral facilitators who bring in the social justice perspective for the steering committees and for communities in your region that have been highly impacted by the effects of structural racism and environmental injustice. In our time today, we're looking forward to reviewing the principles and values that guide our work as facilitators and sharing some examples of previous projects that reflect what the community is seeking in a facilitator, including sharing some information about projects that we've supported in the field of environmental justice. Finally, we're confident that what we share with you today will answer all of the questions that you have submitted to our team. Thank you for submitting those questions to us in advance. We're also going to share information beyond the questions that you asked, just to share more about our organization, the values that we have, and our individual values that make us strong facilitators. If other questions come to mind, we're happy to answer those at the end of our presentation if any time allows. Our presentation today is organized in 3 sections. First, we'll provide an overview of who we are, our values, and the areas of our work. Next, we'll share some examples of projects that reflect what the community seeks in a facilitator. And finally, we will ensure that we answer any additional questions that you have at the end. I'll go ahead and start off by providing an overview of who we are, but before we dive into that, I'm going to introduce myself first and then let my colleagues here share a little bit about themselves as well. So my name is Gabby Magaña. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm a bilingual Spanish speaker and research associate at Harder & Company. I grew up in the Southeast Los Angeles area, in the city of Maywood, very close to an industrial manufacturing area. And many members of my community growing up suffered from adverse health effects because of the toxic waste and environmental pollution in my area. This has personally led me to be interested in supporting the environmental justice movement because I've witnessed the direct tie between environmental health and physical and mental well-being. Currently, in my work here at Harder & Company, I've had the privilege to support organizations that are based in the San Joaquin Valley, focusing on housing and health broadly. And I also support an initiative that focuses on remediation services for asthma patients across California. I'm very grateful that I get to share this space with you all today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Amy Ramos, to introduce herself.
Thank you, Gabby. Buenas tardes a todos. For the interpreter, I will be speaking in Spanish, so I'm not sure if folks need to switch back or how the interpretation might work. So, buenas tardes, mi nombre es doctora Amy Ramos. En primer lugar, me gustaría agradecerles por el privilegio de tener la oportunidad de colaborar con ustedes en la lucha por crear un mundo más justo para nuestras comunidades. Soy primera generación mexicana-americana y crecí en San Diego. Como defensora de los derechos humanos, entiendo que no es suficiente ser invitada a la mesa. Debemos asegurarnos.
Sorry, Amy, can I stop you for 1 second? We don't have simultaneous from Spanish to English to switch back and forth. So we can have, so it's from English to Spanish, we have simultaneous, but we can do the opposite. If we have pause, if you're going to speak Spanish, we can have Marisela do the English interpretation sort of in between sentences or a couple of sentences, if that works.
Yeah, I can switch to English. That's fine. Whatever.
Yeah, so if that's okay with you, we definitely, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
Marisela, we're ready. Okay. Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Amy Ramos, and first I'd like to start by thanking you all for this privilege to be here tonight, to have the opportunity to collaborate with you all in the struggle against fighting systemic racism and looking for opportunities to improve the well-being of our communities. As a first-generation Mexican-American raised in San Diego, I understand very well how important it is to work together in community to find solutions that best fit the needs of our people. As someone who has fought for human rights my entire life, I understand that it's not enough to be invited to the table. We must provide opportunities for us to be heard and for community voice to lead the solutions that best fit the needs of the community, right? So we understand that, and I particularly understand that the community knows what's best for itself. So as part of this work, I understand that we will be hopefully working together to really create some solutions that you all inform the local air pollution district on so that you can have a more equitable community. My passion is really around learning and figuring out how to elevate the community to have that same learning. I understand that education provides opportunities for all of us to actually be creative and find the right solutions that allow us to show our passions and allow us to be able to have a community where everyone can thrive. So today you're going to be learning more about some of the work that we've been doing together, and I'll be able to address more of my own individual experience as we go on and collaborate through this work together. So with that said, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Daniela, to give you her own introduction.
Thank you so much, Amy. And just something logistical. Yeah, just so that folks can see Jessica, appreciate it. So hi everyone, good evening. My name is Daniela Flores. My pronouns are she, her, ella. Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Daniela Flores. I'm a research associate here at Harder & Company and a facilitator for the AB 617 community in Imperial County. I grew up in Calexico, and it really has been the privilege of my life to be their facilitator. As you may know, Calexico is an agricultural community along the US-Mexico border. And, you know, I've growing up and even today, I've, you know, been able to see the environmental injustices experienced by our community members or farm worker families or migrant workers and folks that live in the rural areas. And, you know, more recently in Imperial, I've been able to have the opportunity to advocate for health justice and for better working and living conditions for farm workers there. So I share this because I feel a deep connection with communities that have experienced similar burdens and injustices in terms of, and that really, as you will get to know us hopefully and see that this really does fuel my passion for environmental justice. And my role in this organization, I've been able to work on evaluation and research projects that aim at addressing other factors that impact our health and well-being. Some of those are around food insecurity, health inequities and disparities.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you just slow down just a little bit for the interpreters?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
You know what, I am sorry for going so quickly. I'm gonna back up a little bit just because I wanna make sure that you can get you know, the message that I'm trying to convey in this introduction. But I wanted to share with folks that, you know, I grew up in a similar community in Calexico where, you know, I've been able to see a lot of the environmental injustices that have happened there. And to the families that work there in particular, I know that, you know, I've been able to work closely with farm workers there and also advocate for, you know, improved work conditions and living conditions. So, and the reason I share this is really to be able to communicate where, you know, the fuel for my passion for this work comes, and also the like willingness to really work with different stakeholders to improve the health of communities. So I've had the opportunity in my organization at Harder & Company, I've been able to work on other projects that relate to health, other factors like food insecurity, health equity, and also climate equity. So with that, I will pass it on to my colleague Liz, and appreciate your time. Look forward to sharing more in a moment.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liz. My pronouns are she, her. I grew up in Los Angeles, specifically in the North Hollywood and Van Nuys neighborhoods. Like my colleagues, I became interested in the environmental justice movement after witnessing how the environmental harms were disproportionately impacting the communities around me. And I also gained a deeper understanding of the connection between health and environment through both my brother and I growing up with asthma. Both my studies and my personal experience have centered around understanding how a healthy environment can contribute to a thriving community. And I'm committed to raising awareness of how the mental and physical health benefits of experiencing nature are not at all equitably distributed, with our BIPOC communities often not having the same access to the benefits of clean air and green space. And so I'm very grateful for being invited into this space to hopefully continue this work and help make your voices heard. So with that, I will pass it off to my colleague, Jessica.
Thank you, Liz. Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica, and I bring a wealth of experience to my work. As a resident of the Central Valley, I have experienced the inequalities that exist in our communities. In such a wealthy state, and with such intentional legislation passed to improve our environments, the Central Valley still grapples with some of the worst air pollution in the state. This has motivated me to do work in the environmental justice space, and I am part of this team because I believe in the power and strength of communities to improve the places where they live or where we live and work. I believe in providing information to help people make decisions and to make changes. And now I will turn it back to Gabby.
Thank you so much for sharing, team. As you can see, we're passionate about our work, and we have a strong team who are based in or have done community-connected work throughout California. We have extensive expertise working broadly in the fields of health equity, education, and environmental justice. And we know that this is complex work, and it's really important to do this work well, as it has implications for the future of your communities. Next, I'm going to share a little bit about the last slide, please. I'm going to share with you some information about how we approach this work here at Harder & Company. One of the many reasons that I'm excited about this team is that we're all guided by a few core principles, which get at the purpose that guides our work as facilitators and as researchers. The first is that we center community voice in our work. We anticipate working closely with the committee members to solidify our role as facilitators and to ensure that we're supporting the group and not hindering progress. Centering community voice is a crucial part of the equity-oriented framework that guides all of our work. For example, we'll share more later on about how our team ensures that meetings are accessible by providing technical assistance and capacity building for virtual convenings, ensuring language accessibility, and setting grounding rules for all meetings to ensure that folks are more than just invited to have a seat at the table, but to ensure that their voices are heard and that your input really helps to guide the decisions for the well-being of your community. With that, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Daniela, who's going to share some more examples about how we do this work.
Thank you, Gabby. For this next section, I'm going to continue to share about our approach to community engagement, capacity building, and how we intentionally work with tools and strategies that promote meaningful and inclusive community engagement. We deeply recognize the value of lived experiences of the community members that we engage with. We have shared values in community-driven change. We think that when communities at the driver's seat, we believe that impact really reflects their own vision in mind. We bring a thoughtful and experienced team that understands the health and environmental inequities that exist in Central Valley and throughout California. We also bring creative and innovative strategies to gather feedback from the community. Jessica now will share some more examples of what this work looks like, and we can go to the next slide.
Thank you, Daniela. As you may know, we have worked with agencies on a regional, statewide, and national level and supported community-driven processes and learning strategies. Our primary purpose is to elevate community voices. To us, that means going beyond having a seat at the table. It is ensuring that your voice is guiding the decisions in your community. Effective community engagement is critical to community-driven program planning and implementation. Air districts and the CSC should share leadership and decision-making when carrying out effective community engagement. We encourage inclusivity by using some processes that ensure everyone is heard and people are not speaking over each other. We will help you learn how to use some of these processes to ensure that individuals have an opportunity to express themselves. There are some good public policies that make it your right to be heard. Luckily, AB 617 is one of those state-funded policies that require community input. Our job as facilitators is to create a transparent process that ensures your voice is heard all the way through, from the meeting to the decisions. Next slide, please. Our goal is for every one of you to have the knowledge to actively participate in meetings. As a team, we utilize strategies and innovative methods to gather input to achieve this goal. For example, during challenging conversations, we have had focused discussions with guided questions to facilitate consensus building. And consensus building is exactly what it sounds like. It's a method to work through different points of view. We have done other interactive mapping activities such as process mapping to help multiple stakeholders develop understanding and visualizations of the end goal by exploring what the stakeholders do and who is responsible for each step. We also understand that there are other simple approaches to be more inclusive of community members. For example, for those folks who are visual learners, we create dashboards and infographics to help with processing and visualizing data and findings, as shown on this slide. We are intentional about having non-technical language for community members to understand the information being presented. If we must use the technical language, we will provide a definition. For example, I just used consensus building. We also translate our documents into the language that is needed in our communities, and that doesn't just mean Spanish. And of course, as a research company, we conduct surveys, telephone or online, to gather input from both stakeholders and community members alike. During the pandemic, we have transitioned to hosting meetings via Zoom, and in order to make our meetings accessible, we have enabled multiple avenues for the community to express their concerns and ideas to improve their community. For example, for our AB 617 work in Imperial Valley, we have a dedicated email address for the public to send their questions or comments ahead of the meeting. We also stream on Facebook Live, and our team monitors questions and comments, and we read them out during public comment period to ensure that the questions and comments can be addressed and be on record. We have convened meetings that facilitate community voice by documenting all questions asked by community representatives and the community steering committee. Although we have been conducting virtual meetings over a year and a half, some individuals still have a challenging time with technology. We provide real-time technical support for folks that have issues with their computer, such as muting or unmuting. It's little things like these that are often overlooked, but make meetings accessible for the community. I will now pass it back to Daniela, and she will tell you more about our environmental justice work. Thank you.
Thank you. We have had the opportunity to work extensively on various programs and initiatives that bring diverse stakeholders to engage in a collaborative process. Specifically, we've worked with governmental and non-governmental organizations in service of issues that are associated with air quality, environmental health, and climate equity. As you can see in this slide, we've worked alongside clients that aim to improve public health in communities that are experiencing a disproportionate burden from exposure to air pollution and environmental hazards. We understand the history, status, and important lessons from the planning and implementation of the Community Air Protection Program. We understand that AB 617 is a significant step forward in transforming California's air quality program and to really address the air pollution with strategies that center the community's well-being at the center. We understand and recognize the importance of inclusive community engagement in environmental justice initiatives. As a result, we've had the opportunity to collaborate and partner with communities across the state. And some of the icons that are reflected here reflect the various initiatives. We apply the same principles we've been discussing with you today to these projects. For the Imperial AB 617 Community Facilitation Project, we've been doing that since 2019. And as facilitators in this community, in partnership with the local air district and with environmental justice organizations, and of course, community members, part of our role has been to really uplift community voice in our approach as facilitators. This meaningful community engagement that prioritizes conflict resolution and building agreement among community stakeholders, with different perspective has allowed them to reach key planning and implementation milestones. In partnership with environmental justice leadership in California, we've also facilitated the support and development of the AB 617 People's Blueprint, which is driven by environmental justice principles. And we've supported the planning and facilitation for the annual AB 617 convening. As you might have heard, it's coming up, and it's a place where AB 617 community stakeholders throughout California are able to get together, reflect, learn from one another, and also share ideas about their vision for the future. As the research and evaluators, we've also worked with the California Strategic Growth Council to evaluate the California Climate Investments Technical Assistance that is also supporting impacted communities. In closing, if given the opportunity to work with you all and support you in this effort, we would carry out the principles that we've discussed today and apply them to your local context in San Joaquin Valley to fit your community's assets, needs, and vision for a healthier community. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to my colleague, Amy, who will share a few more thoughts. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for your time this evening. As you can see, we've provided you with an overview of who we are as an organization, an overview of who we are as individuals, the principles and the values that we bring to this work. And we've answered your questions by providing you an overview of how we approach facilitation and specifically answered your questions with some concrete examples using our current AB 617 portfolio and using some other climate justice work that we're doing across the state. So thank you again for your time, and I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Liz, to wrap us up.
So I'm wondering if we have some time for taking questions from the community.
Yeah, so we didn't have time in the last one, but definitely we have time here. I will share with you one last question we did ask the community that was a submitted question. That it certainly is something that would be nice for, I think, everyone listening here, was if you are selected, what sort of context or feedback or information would you need from community members in order to make this a successful project? So in order to sort of set you up as facilitators in this process.
Great. Would anyone from my team like to take this question?
I'm happy to get us started, and then if other colleagues want to jump in. So I'll start by kind of going off from the last kind of little portion that I mentioned. It really would be like getting to know this community in terms of what the work that they've done, getting to know the CSC, the Community Steering Committee, and the dynamics that have been going on. One step that we commonly take with our clients when we start working with them is really have a reflective moment and really allow them to provide us some reflections of what has worked really well in the past, what hasn't worked as well, what improvements they'd like to see, and yeah, well, what they would like from us specifically to adapt into the San Joaquin Valley context to really be able to help facilitate the process and help them reach those milestones. I don't know if anyone else from my team wanted to add anything else.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I will add is that what we've learned through facilitating several AB 617 processes is that everyone who's involved is at a different level of understanding of the legislation and also in a different level of understanding the terminology that's associated with the pollution, so the sources of pollution, also different level of understanding of the mitigation efforts. So our initial first phase of working with any of the AB 617 communities includes really having a listening session where we get to hear from community members about what do they think is working well, to Daniela's point, what is not working well, and what do they need to be heard by the local air district, and what are the solutions that they're not seeing as being valued, whether it's through the local air district or through CARB or through other agencies. I think one of the hallmarks that you'll notice of working with us is that as a neutral facilitator to us, we take that very personal. And that means that we're translating, right? Sometimes it's that technical terminology, translating what people are saying so that we can ensure that everyone is understood.
Thank you. So we do have about 5 minutes left. So I do see Naimeen Martinez. She is someone who has been with us from the beginning. She is an EJ advocate who sits on the Fresno CSC, and I will have, I think I can do it even on my end. Naimeen, go ahead, we'll unmute you.
Thank you. Buenas tardes. Hello, team. So I think you already start describing or answering this question, but I want a little bit more details. So your team obviously has a lot of experience working in environmental justice communities just because of where you guys were born and raised, but there's only one of you who is from the Valley. So how would you go about getting to know that communities in the Valley, Stockton, Fresno, Arvin, Lamont, Chapter? Because yes, you acknowledge that we are all different. We might have some similarities, but we have different cultures, different, ways of doing things and thinking. So how would you bridge that lack of familiarity with this geographic region? So that is and how would you use all the best practices and toolkit of the lessons learned from the other AB 617 to perhaps help us understand, bring other ideas fresh ideas to us?
Thank you so much, Naimeen. I can go ahead and start trying to answer this question, and if other folks from my team would like to jump in, please feel free to do so. I think that you're totally right that some of us are spread across the state of California, but personally, a few of us have had the privilege of working in the San Joaquin Valley with different organizations, so have started to build a knowledge of those communities by working and learning from them directly. And I would say our general approach to getting to know communities is to really let them speak to us about their experience and to take a step back and learn directly about what's different, what are the nuances, what are the unique needs, so that we can come and provide the tools needed to elevate their needs and enable them to really advocate for themselves. And yeah, I can pass it on to anyone else on my team who would like to contribute to responding to this question.
Yeah, so today you see 4 of us, 5 of us here on this interview or this community engagement, and we have proposed that more folks from our team could be facilitators. So we do have, as an organization, we have a large portfolio of work in the San Joaquin Valley. To Gabby's point, in addition to that, one of the key best practices around, I guess, cultural competency is really allowing the community to not only speak for themselves, but recognize that they already know what they need, right? So we don't need to go into a community, especially as, like I shared, I'm from San Diego. I'm not going to go into the San Joaquin Valley and say, this is what you need because this is what worked in San Diego. That is definitely not our approach. Our approach is to go in with a listening and learning approach and really allow a community-driven process so we can tailor ourselves, because whether we're going to be there in person or virtual, like I'm imagining that the next few meetings will definitely be virtual, but as COVID hopefully starts to allow us to go back to some sort of new normal, that we will be sending folks from our team into the community to have some of those listening sessions. In addition to that, that means that we might have to meet with CSC members or other community members outside of the monthly meetings to be able to really get a grasp of what are the true issues in that region. And then there was a question about capacity building. So I think this is a great opportunity to showcase that we do believe in ensuring that we're building the capacity of the community so that at one point, if we really have broken down some of the systemic racist systems, that we are no longer needed, that you won't need a facilitator, right? That sounds kind of weird to say that hopefully at one point you won't need us anymore, we're out of a job, but that's the reality, right? So if we have done our job well, eventually community members are beyond empowered. They have the capacity and education and ability to then make sure that they're heard. So Jessica has some concrete examples that can highlight this a little bit further.
Hi, Naomi. Thank you so much for your question. I actually wanted to share a little bit more of my experience with AB 617, working with AB 617 in the Imperial Valley. I started off not knowing about the community, but as I listened more to the conversations that they were having, I started hearing the things that were important to them and doing the research around it. For example, I understand their concern with the border. I understand their concern with the Salton Sea, and then also listening to those relationships, because that's what a lot of our job is also, is listening to the community and listening to their experiences with the Air District. And really doing the research, not only person to person, but also doing research in the background. What are the things that affect San Joaquin Valley? Probably a lot of pollution from the pesticides, right? Because we're that kind of community, the agricultural community. And those are things that my colleagues and I have been able to do based on, just talking with the CSCs and the community members, bringing them in, because some community members don't have time to be part of the CSC, but they're still very active. So hopefully that sheds a little bit of light. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think that brings us to that 35-ish minutes. So I so appreciate all of you coming on, giving your perspective. I know that the group that is on listening right now and those that are going to watch the recording, hopefully over the weekend, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Ramos and your team. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you, you too. So as we kind of wrap up here, I just wanted to thank all of you for attending. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we will be sending out a reminder email tomorrow of where to find the recording for this interview panel that we just did. And so if you feel the need to rewatch it before you fill out the survey, if you feel comfortable filling out that survey right now, any of that is welcome as long as you do it before noon on Monday. So as always, please reach out to us. You have Zong's email, you have lots of emails from her. So please, you can respond directly to that email with any questions, concerns, or anything else as it relates to this. And we look forward to sharing with you some of the reflections we've heard, and certainly, of course, sharing with you the outcome of what we did today. So thank you all and have a great night.